Invisible Stanley, Chapter 4 In the Park. It was a Sunday afternoon. Arthur had gone to visit a friend. So Mr. and Mrs. Ramtop set out with Stanley for the nearest park. The streets were crowded, and Stanley carried his balloon to lessen the risk of being jostled by people hurrying by. Near the park, they met Ralph Jones, an old college friend of Mr. Ramchop's. "Always a treat running into your family, George," said Mr. Jones. "The older boy was flat once, I recall. You had him rolled up, and once you had a foreign lad with you." "A prince, yes?" "What a memory you have," said Mr. Ramchop, recalling the young genie who had been with them at the time. "How are you, Ralph?" said Mrs. Ramchop. "Stanley, say hello to Mr. John." "Take care," said Mr. Jones. "That balloon is floating. Just where's Stanley?" "Holding the balloon," Stanley said. "I got invisible somehow." "Is that so?" "First flat, now invisible." Ralph Jones shook his head. "Kids always one thing or another." "Huh, George? My oldest needs dental work. Well, I must run. Remember me to that Prince Fauzi Mustafa Aslan Miraza Milak Namar Haraj, as I recall." "A truly remarkable memory," said Mrs. Ramchop as Mr. John walked away. By a field in the park, the Ramchops found a bench on which to rest. On the field, children were racing bicycles round and round. Suddenly shouted Rose, "Give up, Billy!" Billy said, "No good. Billy, silly Billy. He can't ride a bicycle." "That must be Billy," said Mrs. Ramchop. "The little fellow so far behind the rest. Oh dear, how he teeters." Stanley remembered how nervous he had been when he was learning to ride, and how his father had steadied him. "Poor Billy! If only I will do it," he thought, and tied his balloon to the bench. When Billy came round again, Stanley darted on the field. Taking hold of the teetering bicycle from behind, he began to run. "Oh, oh!" said little Billy, surprised to be gain speed. Stanley ran harder, keeping the bicycle steady. The pedal rose and fell, faster and faster, then faster still. "Yah-eek!" cried Billy. Stanley ran as fast as he could. Soon they passed a boy riding ahead, then another boy and another. Not until they had passed all other riders did Stanley, now out of breath, let go. "Hoo-wee!" Billy shouted and went round once more by himself. "You win, Billy!" shouted the other boys. "How did you get so good, and so suddenly? You sure had us fooled." Stanley got his spirit back and returned it to Mr. and Mrs. Ramchop on the bench. "Too bad you missed it, Stanley," said Mr. Ramchop, pretending he had not guessed it too. The teetery little boy, he rode very well suddenly. "Oh?" said Stanley, pretending also. "I wasn't paying attention, I guess." Mr. Ramchop gave him a little poke in the ribs. Half an hour passed, and Mrs. Ramchap worried that they might be sitting too long in the sun. In the Stanley's present state, she said, overtanning would be difficult to detect. Just then, a young man and pretty girl strolled past, hand in hand, and halting the grove in the tree close by. That is Phillips, the son of my dear friend, Mrs. Hudson, Mr. Ramchap said. And the girl must be his sweetheart, Lucia. Such a sad story. They are in love, and Phillips wants very much to propose marriage. But he is too shy. He try, Mrs. Hudson said. But each time he called to fail, and Lucia is too timid to coax the proposal from him. Mr. Ramchap was not a least bit shy. I will go introduce myself, he said, and popped a question for him. No, George, Mrs. Ramchap shook her head. Lucia must hear the word from Philip's own lips. An idea came to Stanley. Be right back, he said, and ran to the grove in which the young couple stood. Once beside them, he stood very still. Nice day, Lucia, don't you think? Philip was saying, though they say it may rain, who knows? You're quite right, I'm sure, Phillips, the young girl replied. I do value your opinion about the weather. You are kind, very kind. Phillips trembled a bit. Lucia wanted to ask, would you consent? That is, he gulped. What a pretty dress you had on. Thank you, said Lucia. I like your necktie. You were saying, Phillips? Oh, said Phillips. All right, yes. For some time now, dear Lucia, my dearest wish. Oh my, I want to. He bit his lip. Look, a dark cloud there in the west. It may rain after all. I hope not. Lucia seems close to tears. I mean, if I rained, well, we might get wet. This is very boring. Stanley thought the conversation grew even more boring. Again and again, and Phillips failed to declare his love, chattering instead about the weather or the look of a tree or children playing in the park. I want to ask dear Lucia, Philip began again for perhaps the 20th time. If you will, that is, if, yes, said Lucia, also perhaps for the 20th time. What, Phillips? What do you wish to say? Stanley leaned forward. Lucia, said Phillips. Marry me, said Stanley, making his voice as much like Phillips as he could. Lucia's eyes opened wide. I will, Phillips, said Cry. Of course, I will marry you. Phillips looked as if he might faint. What? Did I? You will? Lucia hugged him and they kissed. I've proposed at last, cried Philip. I can hardly believe I spoke the word. You didn't, Stanley thought. Mr. and Mrs. Ramchap had seen the lovers' embrace. Well done, Stanley, they said, when he returned to their bench and several more times on the way home. Mrs. Hudson called that evening to report that Phillips and Lucia would soon be wed. How wonderful, Mrs. Ramchap said. She had glimpsed them in the park just that afternoon. Such a handsome pair, so much in love. Stanley teased her. Stanley teased, teased her. You said never to sneak up on people or spy on them, but I did today. Are you mad at me? Oh, very angry, said Mrs. Ramchep, and kissed the top of his head.